All right, buckle up because we're diving into some seriously intriguing stuff today. This Book of Nations. We're talking Noah, Asher, those big biblical names, right?
Right.
But then it throws in Norse gods and Native American traditions. It's like, what is going on here?
It's really unlike anything I've ever encountered. This fusion of traditions that are usually, totally separate. Super intriguing.
It really makes you wonder what we've missed in the usual history books, right?
Absolutely. It suggests a history that's been hidden or at least overlooked by mainstream narratives.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here to uncover, right?
Exactly. We're on a deep dive today, folks, and this one starts with a lineage claiming to descend from, get this, Noah himself.
Through his son Japheth, to be precise.
Right, through Japheth. And hold on, it gets even wilder. This line eventually leads to, wait for it, Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea.
Yeah, that one definitely caught my eye as well. We can't take it literally, of course, but it does highlight something crucial about the ancient world. It was far more interconnected than we often imagine.
Right. Think about the Phoenicians, amazing sailors, traders, all over the Mediterranean.
Precisely. And venturing even further beyond. So to think that their explorations, maybe even their myths, their stories, influenced the early Greeks, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
So we're talking about Poseidon, maybe not as a god, but as a real person, a historical figure. Maybe even an Asherite whose legend grew over time. Okay, now my mind is blown. Tell me more about these Asherites. They seem to be at the heart of this Book of Nations.
They are absolutely central. They're described as these incredible seafarers, echoing, the biblical association of Asher with ships and riches.
Right, right.
And that focus on seafaring, that actually links them to what we know about those Phoenicians we were just talking about. Master shipbuilders, traders, they ranged far and wide.
So we could be looking at a group descended from these, big, important biblical figures who were navigating the seas, setting up trade routes long before the Greeks rose to prominence. Talk about rewriting history.
It's a very compelling idea. And the way the Book of Nations lays it all out, it's deliberate, it's structured in different sections, almost like individual books themselves, each one focusing on a specific person, a specific era.
Oh, interesting.
It really is like piecing together each book, each section, it's a clue to a much bigger picture.
And some of these puzzle pieces, they're mind-blowing, to say the least.
Okay, so we've got the lineage from Noah through Japheth, down to Meshech, and then the guy named Chittim.
Keep going, you're on a roll.
And Chittim, this is where it gets wild. Chittim is supposedly the father of Poseidon. It's like somebody took a genealogy chart and smashed it together with Greek mythology.
I love it. And again, that connection to the Phoenicians just keeps strengthening the case for a historical grain of truth within all of these myths,
Right.
The Phoenicians, they were known to venture beyond even the Mediterranean. We're talking the Atlantic, maybe even further. It's totally plausible that those voyages, those encounters, influenced how the Greek myths developed later on. Maybe they added a real, tangible human element to these larger-than-life figures. It really makes you wonder just how much cultural exchange was happening back then, and how much of it, like you said, has been lost, totally forgotten. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, you mentioned their journeys, and those journeys, they continue, right? Every turn in this Book of Nations takes us further into uncharted waters. What other incredible voyages does it describe?
Well, one journey that immediately stands out is Benjamin's. The text describes him leading his people on this, epic search for a promised land. Guided by an angel, no less.
Wow, guided by an angel. That's some serious divine intervention right there.
Right. And get this, it describes them landing near this vast body of water. Some think it hints at a transatlantic crossing.
Hold on, wait. They weren't just, sailing around the Mediterranean. They were going for the open ocean. That's a whole other level of, daring, the technology, the guts it would take for that time period.
Exactly. It speaks volumes about their skills as these master navigators and also the depth of their faith, trusting in that divine guidance to lead them to a new home. But hold on, their journeys don't stop there. The text introduces us to, get this, Jimnariah.
Jimnariah, okay.
A descendant of Benjamin. And he embarks on a westward voyage of his own.
Okay, now this is where it gets really, really interesting for me. Because Jimnariah's travels, they seem to intersect with another story that some listeners might know, the Book of Mormon.
You got it. Precisely. According to this Book of Nations, Jimnariah, on his journey, he has this incredible encounter with a figure named Moroni.
Moroni, as in?
The same Moroni, who, in the Book of Mormon, is the last prophet of the Nephites.
Okay, for our listeners who might not know, Remind us, who are the Nephites?
Right. So the Nephites, they're this ancient civilization that the Book of Mormon, it's their story, their history, their religious record.
Okay, so we're potentially talking about a link. The Asherites sailing over from, like, the old world, meeting up with the Nephites in the Americas. That's huge.
It really is. And
Yep.
it's even more specific. The text actually pinpoints their meeting place as the Hill Cumorah.
Hill Cumorah. Why does that sound familiar?
Well, in the Book of Mormon, the Hill Cumorah is this hugely significant location. It's the place where Moroni is said to have buried the golden plates,
The golden plates?
the ones containing the entire Nephite record, the record that Joseph Smith, according to his account, used to translate the Book of Mormon.
Wow.
But it gets even more interesting. The text actually describes Moroni imparting, sharing knowledge to Jemariah. And get this, he even gives them a gift, a sacred sword.
A sword. Okay, that's not something you just give to anyone. There's got to be some serious meaning behind that.
Right. Swords, they're not just weapons. They often represent power, protection, even leadership. It's like a symbol. So in this context,
Okay.
it could be seen as a transfer of spiritual authority, or even like the forging of an alliance between these two groups, uniting their lineages in a way.
Wow. A meeting of cultures, a sharing of knowledge, maybe even a passing of the torch in a way. It's just incredible to think about. This Book of Nations, though, it's not all peaceful exchanges and shared wisdom, right? We've talked about conflict, about wars.
You're absolutely right. Conflict, it's this recurring theme. And honestly, it plays a really crucial role in their spiritual development. One example that comes to mind is the war between Yithril, who's a descendant of Jemariah, and this figure named, get ready for it, Odinahel.
Odinahel. It sounds an awful lot like Odin, from Norse mythology, the god of war, wisdom, all that.
Exactly. You're picking up on a key element here. The text, it seems to be drawing a deliberate parallel between Odinahel and, the big guy himself, Odin. Odinahel is portrayed as this mighty ruler with this, powerful army, echoing those classic attributes of Odin.
So it's like we're seeing this fascinating interplay between, historical figures and these almost mythological figures. Their stories are woven together in a way that honestly makes your head spin a little.
It really does. And this war between Yithril and Odinahel, it's not just about, conquest or territory. It highlights something really deep about their culture. The importance of covenants, of alliances. And we see the role faith plays in their strategies, how they approach warfare, but also the very real personal sacrifices that leadership demands.
Right. It reminds us that these weren't just names on a page. These were real people with families, beliefs, grappling with these incredibly complex situations, just like us in a way. And speaking of complex roles, you mentioned something earlier that really caught my attention, the shield maidens.
Ah, yes.
These are like the fierce female warriors often found in those Norse legends, right?
You got it. And the Book of Nations, it describes these women as not just warriors, but leaders in their own right. They're vital. It really challenges our assumptions about gender roles in, these ancient societies.
100%. This isn't the image we usually get from history books, right?
Yeah.
These women were on the front lines, fighting alongside the men, shaping their own destinies. It makes their story even more powerful, don't you think?
Absolutely. And, through these journeys, these encounters, even these conflicts, we're seeing how this lineage, they adapted, they evolved, they forged this unique identity, borrowing from and influencing the cultures around them.
It's like this vibrant cultural tapestry, woven together from these threads of different traditions, each one contributing to the bigger picture. But we've only just, scratched the surface here. What about their spiritual beliefs? How did they connect with, the divine? How did they experience that in their lives? We've journeyed from those ancient seafarers all the way to encounters with figures like Moroni. It's not just about who they were, it's about what they believed. What made their hearts tick? What can you tell me about their spirituality?
One of the most striking things about their practices, at least to me, is the emphasis on ceremony. It's about actively connecting with the divine. Not just holding beliefs, but living them, experiencing them.
So less about abstract ideas and more about rituals, traditions, ways of interacting with the spiritual realm in a tangible, real way.
Exactly. It's about experience. And they had some truly fascinating practices. For example, their naming ceremony, they call it the Atonwa.
Okay, the Aton, I've seen that mentioned in the text, but what does it actually mean? What did it look like?
So imagine this. A child is born.
Yeah.
Right? And they're not just given a name, a regular name, they're also given this personal song.
A song?
Yeah, song of thanksgiving, a song unique to them. And it's meant to link them to their ancestors to express gratitude for their place in this whole lineage.
Wow, deeply spiritual. It connects them to something so much bigger than themselves. You mentioned ancestors. Was there a strong emphasis on lineage, on family history, and their spirituality?
Oh, definitely. Remembering their ancestors, honoring them, it was key. It was how they understood their place in the world, their purpose. And speaking of the practices, there's another aspect I find particularly fascinating. The Moon Lodge.
Yes, the Moon Lodge. Ever since you mentioned it, I've been so curious. What exactly was it?
So the text itself, it doesn't go into like super specific detail about all the rituals and practices, but it does describe the Moon Lodge as this sacred space dedicated to women, to their connection with the cycles of the moon and their spiritual power.
That's really interesting. It resonates with what we know about a lot of ancient cultures where women held really significant roles in spiritual matters. It's like this hidden history within a hidden history.
Right. It really makes you think. And it gets even more intriguing when you look at how they received guidance, warnings, even messages from, the divine. This Book of Nations, it talks a lot about dreams and visions being incredibly important to them.
Oh, yeah, like Uhtredol's dream, right? The one that warned him about that war that was coming. It's almost like their dreams were this direct line of communication with the divine, a way to receive messages, to make sense of what was happening around them.
Exactly. It suggests that they lived with a very different understanding of like the veil between the physical and the spiritual, one where those realms were much more closely intertwined than we maybe experience them today.
It wasn't just about rituals, about ceremonies. It was about this constant dialogue, this communication with the spiritual realm. But you also mentioned prophecies earlier. How did those fit into their beliefs?
So the prophecies, they were huge. They offered these glimpses into the future, these hints and warnings. And they really shaped how they understood their destiny, their purpose, all of it. One example that stands out to me is Halfdanr. He kind of goes through this classic arc, rise to power, fall from grace, But then ultimately, redemption through, repentance, turning back to what he knew was right. It's a reminder that power can corrupt even someone who starts with good intentions.
A timeless message, right? Even for us today, it's easy to get caught up in the moment and lose sight of what really matters. But you also mentioned these broader prophecies, the ones about a future gathering, a restoration of lost knowledge. What do you make of those?
Honestly, those are the parts that really send chills down my spine. They speak of a time when the descendants of this lineage, they reunite, their history resurfaces, and that ancient wisdom, those traditions, they're revitalized. It's powerful stuff.
It's almost like an invitation, right, to us, the readers, the listeners, to consider our own place in this grand unfolding story.
I think so. I think that's the beauty of the Book of Nations. It doesn't give us all the answers. It's an invitation to stay curious, to keep asking these big questions, and to keep searching for those connections, those echoes of the past in our present.
To wonder if maybe, just maybe, there are truths hidden within our own family histories, waiting to be uncovered, to be understood.
Exactly. And maybe by listening to these stories from the past, by really engaging with them, we can gain a clearer understanding of ourselves and our place in the world today.
As we wrap up here, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from exploring the Book of Nations?
The thing that sticks with me most is how much it emphasizes that faith. It's not passive. These people go through the ringer, but they don't just give up. They keep searching, questioning, trying to live by what they believe in. And in doing that, they shape their own destiny.
Powerful stuff. It reminds us we're not just inheriting something and that's it. We have to do something with it, wrestle with it, find our own meaning.
100%. And who knows, maybe when we do that, we'll find our own connections to something bigger, something beyond us, just like those folks in the Book of Nations.
Now that is a thought-provoking note to end on. Our listeners are going to be thinking about that one for a while, I can tell. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive. It's been amazing. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and never stop searching for those connections. You never know what you'll find.